Yeah, so we're going to be talking about what we're calling the Airbnb guest from hell. And this is a month-long guest who turned a brand new house into a puppy mill. So Heather looks excited about this story, but it's not a happy puppy mill story. It's kind of a really not good story. But before we go to that, we're going to talk about a couple other current stories first. And I have to give a warning to all the virtue signalers out there on LinkedIn that we're going to be talking in real talk. And this is not a podcast for the kind of passive aggressive, hypocritical virtue signaler types. You know, Miriam, you know the ones I mean, like the ones in story, in story.
I mean, the real property management groups, right?
That's right. That's right. So we're going to go down to the current stories. And the first is this Airbnb bust. There was this text that went virally throughout all over the world, which was about a collapse of short-term rentals and what is called the Airbnb bust. And it was started by all the rooms, and it showed that revenue was down 40% in markets including Sevierville, Tennessee, Phoenix, Arizona, Austin, Texas, Myrtle Beach, San Antonio, Asheville, etc. And then AirDNA came out and he said that this was just absolutely untrue. Jamie Lane, who's the SVP of AirDNA, the chief economist and SVP of analytics, he pushed back on the notion that this was an Airbnb bust. And Lane tweeted an analysis using AirDNA's data showing the same metro areas covered by all the rooms. The average decline was 3.6% rather than 40%. And so you had kind of two data nerds going back and forth. And I think it's interesting because, Miriam, you're over in the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge market. And we definitely have seen a decline. According to AirDNA, it's about a 9.4% decline, not a 40+% decline in average daily rate. But what are you seeing and what are you hearing in your area?
So for my market, it's definitely not a 40% decrease like you stated. What we're seeing is units that have maintained and gave the guest what they want are doing okay. That they're hitting in that market, that's the margins are still looking good. What we see is some of the older units are struggling. But then you look at it, we had a 10% increase of inventory that was built over the last 12 months in this market. So you see that fluctuation. We had a couple of weekends where, look, we didn't have capacity, not from V-Tribs or other property managements, but then you have 4 or 5 weekends that is 100% sold out. So for us, it's been an up and down kind of, not even just summer season, but as a year, where we are seeing some units that are even outpacing previous years. And then we have some units that, honest to God, I don't know if we could give them away. But again, you look at it as what is it the units that it does not have what the guests are looking for.
Right. So this is really a nuanced story. So, the market in, we call it Gatlinburg, but it's really Sevier County. And there's give or take 25,000 vacation rentals in Sevier County. It's a massive market. Half of them are rent by owner and the other half are professionally managed. So it's a sizable market. And I know, Miriam, you actually stayed pretty good terms with the competition, have lunch, have drinks with them. And, they're pretty candid about, what's going on. But there's really been two or three things here that have unfolded. One, there was in 2021 and 2022, a number of publications that suggested that Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge were providing the number one ROI, return on investment, on vacation rentals in the entire country, right? So then there was this rush for people outside who had never heard of the area to come in and invest, which in and of itself wouldn't be a problem, except for there wasn't a lot of inventory in Sevier County. And they started to invest in areas like Kodak and Townsend, and areas that were way beyond the core. And for the listeners out there, can you explain the difference between vacationing in Kodak, which is really a suburb of Knoxville, and being in Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge?
Yeah, so the Kodak area is very urban. You know, you come off the interstate and you go either into downtown Knoxville or you go down into the Kodak area, which maybe in the next 16 to 18 months does grow. However, you are 20, 30, 45 minutes into anything of capacity of being in the spotlight or entertainment of what you would be from Gatlinburg into Pigeon Forge. So Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge area, you're minutes from Dollywood, downtown Gatlinburg, all the amusements. Whereas Kodak, you're looking at over an hour and you're seeing farms and cows and trailers and all the things. Whereas, you know, I mean, that's the reality of it, right? When you're in the Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area, you are seeing more of the attraction, the Anarchistas of the world, the Ripleys, Flavortown, and all of that.
Right. So I think there's been kind of a misconception of core versus non-core. And as you discussed, which I've had the unfortunate experience as well, the traffic during season is incredible. And if you're in Townsend, which is a lovely place, by the way, but it could take you an hour and a half to get to Pigeon Forge, depending on the traffic pattern, because it's a 2-lane road, one lane in and one way out. I mean, the traffic is unbelievable. So somebody vacationing outside the core of Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge probably is not going to do it again, particularly if they have a family, particularly if they're trying to see the attractions, because those are suburban or outlier areas. And what's really important for people when they vacation is to be in the core.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I think happened is during right after COVID, there was so much demand, far more demand than supply, which is partly why we had these stories saying Gatlinburg had such high ROI, that some of our competitors stopped listing on OTAs like Expedia and Airbnb and VRBO, and they stopped doing paid per click. And they had so much business, they just had their own direct site. And can you kind of talk about that? Because now all of a sudden they don't have enough demand coming through their own internal website.
Correct. No, I think, and look, you look at it, everyone wants to have that direct booking and not deal with the OTAs, the channels, just because there is that disconnect. If you're a small mom and pop organization and you go and you have an issue, like our guest from hell, and you are that mom and pop organization, it could go either way with you. You know, we are fortunate that we are a global company. We do hold some clout with the Airbnbs and the VRBOs to keep those listings. And then, but to go back to it, because we can go down that hole in a minute, having direct bookings and being a small property manager is huge, right? But you need that pay-per-click. Look, I had the pay-per-click conversation with our group. Like it does a lot for us. Steve's shaking his head because everybody's like, do we spend money on this? I'm like, hell yeah, we're spending money on pay-per-click. That's where the majority of bookings come. If you get those ads, let's push the funds from our marketing into that. A lot of people don't understand that. Marketing is definitely not my thing, but I will say I've learned a lot over the past few years, and having the pay-per-click, having that drive with that, it means a lot, and it will push the smaller property managers from being down on the lower scale up by not just having the direct bookings.
Right. For those who don't understand, pay-per-click is effectively a lot of Google and Bing. And if you have the right agency, we use an agency, we're not doing it internally, although we're not using an industry agency, we're using a pay-per-click company that has expertise in this. You can ramp up your spend to drive last minute bookings. And one of the things we've seen this year is the booking window has gotten smaller. People are waiting more and more closer in to book, which you have to have things like pay-per-click and OTAs and email and other things to really pick up those last minute bookings. If not, then what happens is you have a lot of occupied nights. You may not have the revenue going into your owners. And in some cases, we hear about our competition through our vendors, right? So some of the vendors will start to tell us, hey, we're concerned because we're being slow paid. So it's kind of an interesting situation. I mean, a 9% drop in ADR does have an effect, particularly if companies have not diversified their marketing spend. So this story is not going to go away. It's going to continue. I think there were a lot of issues this summer. Cruise ships, the dollar was strong against most currencies in the world, so people took the chance to go internationally, unlike maybe previous years. But you do need to make sure you have diverse marketing and you can take advantage of those last minute bookings. So I want to talk about a couple other things here that I have. Miriam, did you get this email about introducing One Key? So One Key is now the Expedia VRBO version of what Booking.com is doing with effectively their Genius discount, where VRBO did not have a loyalty program in the past. Expedia did. So this is tying across Expedia, Hotels.com, and VRBO. And so eligible flights, hotels, vacation rentals, car rentals, activities are all eligible for this. So I think this is something we're going to watch, because we have seen VRBO slip in the Sevierville market, Gatlinburg, et cetera. And I just got my email introducing me to One Key, and I'm curious to see that.
Because I will say this about that you making that comment, because I will say the Sevierville, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg market, I always said before, it was an older group, right? And so now you're seeing that because everything downtown has changed out. We're getting a younger crowd, which I say this a lot too. Airbnb is more for the younger group. Most younger people don't use VRBO. And so I think that's a turn on it from what we're seeing, where we're seeing that decline in this market with the VRBO is the generational gap of who's booking on there, right? I mean, if I'm booking, I don't book on VRBO. I see Kaylee shaking her head because we're kind of a different generation. It's kind of the same.
It's a verb though. Airbnb, I think that's the competitive edge they have is when people are talking about vacation rentals outside the industry, people will say they Airbnb. It's almost interchangeable. In fact, I would think that's probably what people understand it to be versus what it really is, which is that's just a platform.
Yeah. I was watching on Netflix. I'll throw my not really my nerdiness, my sportsness in. I was watching The Quarterback. It's an 8-episode series put out by Peyton Manning, and Patrick Mahomes. He's one of the 3 guys that they're talking to, and he says on there in the 8 episodes, he speaks about booking from Airbnb. And so, I mean, it's like, and it's not something that he may be getting paid for, who truly knows, right? But I mean, he says it because that's what his family booked. I mean, and how many people in this generation are you seeing saying, hey, I booked on Airbnb, even through the Super Bowl and everything else? It's a generational gap and I think that's a huge aspect we're seeing in this market with it.
They won the language.
That's part of the, when V-Trips came in and bought quite a few companies in 2022, most of those companies were either direct or on VRBO and direct. Only a handful were even on Airbnb, and certainly we didn't see companies on Booking.com. So, we spent a lot of time to diversify that so that we could get a more diverse flow and distribution. And it's had a real effect because we track ourselves, and we've tracked ourselves ahead of kind of where the competition is, at least based on key data. But the other thing that happened recently is Florida passed some new legislation, and this was Senate Bill 170. And it hands, and we didn't really discuss it until just recently, because we were waiting for Governor Ron DeSantis to sign the bill. There was some concern he may not, because local governments were so upset about it. These local cities, local counties, they want to have control, and they were in some cases doing things that were improper to try to really restrict or make it very difficult for vacation rentals to operate in the state of Florida. So we wanted to wait for Governor DeSantis to sign the bill, and he did about 2 weeks ago. So the ruling applies to everything from noise ordinances to pet stores and, of course, vacation rentals. And Senate Bill 170 allows companies to effectively sue county and city governments that pass arbitrary or unreasonable ordinances that harms profits. And they define the amount of profits at $50,000 or more. So it's a pretty low threshold of what profits would be harmed based on these ordinances. And it's a significant win, because vacation rentals have faced restrictions and discriminatory regulations in Florida across several regions in the country, in the counties. And what happened was, even though in Florida there is a law that says you cannot ban or regulate frequency or duration, they were coming in and creating fines, registration, inspections. They were discriminating with noise and trash and parking ordinances. They were restricting occupancy, and they were doing everything they could to make it very, very difficult, or even impossible in some cases, to operate a vacation rental. So this bill gives owners and property managers the teeth to go after cities and counties. It will put a moratorium on the ordinance that a city or county passes, and pushes towards what's called a rocket docket, so that a county or city can't just pass something, even if they suspect it may not be constitutional, with the hope that the opponents will just kind of go away, because the court systems can be a very long process. And the fact that you can win attorney fees will also make it very difficult for counties and cities to just pass bad or discriminatory regulations. We've been on record as saying we're all for noise ordinances, parking ordinances, or trash, but they have to apply to everyone. They can't just be singling out vacation
It blows
rentals.
my mind. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop you. Like, you would think that, Tennessee and Florida are similar. It's a huge tourism state. That is where most of their funds come from. So it's kind of ridiculous that we have to fight and to get ordinances and to get bills passed, when take that out, take the tourism and all the things out of these states. Where the hell does that leave people?
One of the things we did in Florida, which I think was smart, is we came out with an economic impact study, and it showed that the state of Florida generated $56 billion a year in economic impact, which is a massive number. And that really helped us in the state of Florida in 2023 by really putting that in the hands of key legislatures and leadership, which also you have to have face-to-face meetings. We had a face-to-face meeting with Governor DeSantis. We had 12 property managers. And one of the things we did, which we talked about earlier, is we said, look, we are not Airbnb. We are very different from that San Francisco-based company. We're property managers. We're headquartered here in Florida. That resonated, and that also resonated with politicians. And I do think there's been a bit of a tipping point here with local governments going too extreme towards trying to regulate and zone out vacation. The reason why Kayla's here, and she's been very patient waiting, is that Miriam encountered what would be called the Airbnb guest from hell just recently. So Miriam, I don't know if you have any photos or anything, but we're going to let you explain what happened with this Airbnb guest from hell.
Oh yeah. So just real quick, as most people probably know, we are purpose building some vacation rentals. Our first one gets completed. We're super excited. And we get a 32, 34 day reservation. Look, you see it and you're like, oh, is this what we're doing? But hey, it's a good amount of money. We're excited. My first guest, I'd put a little basket in there, make it look all fabulous, do some little extra things. And then 4 days later, I drive by and it looked like Griswold's family vacation. That's outside my brand new house. That's actually Griswold's is putting it nice. I remember I text Kayla and I'm like, what the hell do we have that can we get rid of this guest, you know? And so poor Kayla's kind of like my go-to on, I'm losing my mind. Am I not losing my mind? What can we do on our end? Can we go in? Can we have conversations? She's like, no, let's just see. Because look, the porches were dirty, some things, but still, I was just this house was new. It was my baby, not a big deal. I'm like, okay. And 3 or 4 days later, I pull into where the next house that we're building, and I look over and there's a German Shepherd laying up on top of my hot tub cover. I look up in the windowsill and there's a cat that's just looking at me out the window of the A-frame. And I'm like, oh, hell no. Like this, what are we doing? We cannot do this. But to our purpose, on our contracts, so everyone look at your contracts, we had cats on there. Like they could have them, dogs and cats. So now no more cats. So long story short, for us, we wanted to go in there weekly just to, for a process of cleaning the hot tub, making sure it's sanitary, doing the swim spa, cleaning it up. We go in, first time, we're like, hey, we're just going to do a courtesy. We knock on the door. There's a big sign that says, do not disturb. And I'm like, well, they can't do that. This is my house. I can go in there anytime I want to. Well, let's be very frank. It does not work like that with our good friends from Airbnb, as Kayla will tell you here in just a few minutes. They have their own rules and regulations. So I didn't know this, right? Well, anyways, the lady comes and she's like, you guys can't come right now. You can come back tomorrow. So she's got little kids and I'm like, okay. So I went to the store. I made a little basket because I felt like I was intruding on their vacation. But again, we had Griswolds there and it just was looking stressful. I got them some floats for the pool, got them a little dog toy, took them some snacks. They let us come in and we see 2 cats and 2 dogs. Okay, still nothing crazy. I mean, they'd only been there a week. It didn't look super crazy, but it did stink a little bit, but whatever. I'm not going to go there. So long story short, 2.5 weeks after that, we ended up going back in the house and I didn't get to go in. Our general manager and our property manager walked in before me and were like, Miriam, you're not coming in. You will go to jail if you walk in this house. I'm going to need you to go back and get in the car. The GM comes out and he says, there's 13 dogs. There's feces and poop everywhere. He said, it looks like a hoarder's gone mad. And there's 2 cats. So I call Kayla. I'm like, they got to go. You're kicking their asses out. This is my house. They've destroyed it. And so Kayla's like, okay, we have a process. We're not just kicking people out. So they take some pictures and then poor Kayla gets involved and has to go through. But before she goes through that, Kayla, tell us a little bit about the difference of process from our rental contract, how it doesn't really work. Because I know most people are not going to understand that just because V-Trips may have a policy of a guest contract, that's not the same way it works with Airbnb.
Have their own policies and processes. So even if we have a guest sign a rental agreement that says, hey, we can come in at any time for maintenance or for the HOA to perform some kind of, trash pickup or whatever, we're able to come in. When it comes to Airbnb, that doesn't really matter to them. You have to have approval from the guest to go into the property or else they consider it a safety issue. They have their own. Yeah, policy. So Airbnb has their own platform where you can message the guest. They want everything going through there. They don't want us texting the guest on the side or sending them emails. They want all the communication in their platform. That way they can see, in this case, if we notified the guest of an inspection and that they're agreeing to it, that it's all in the portal for them to see for when they investigate it.
Even as big of a company as we are, right? I mean, we are the second largest property company in the country. until they found out that this unit was actually Steve Milo's property. We were going to have to go head to head. So if you think about it, right, a $12,000 reservation, a right at $11,000 worth of damages. If you're a small property manager, you would crumble if Airbnb did not give you the payout or help cover those damages.
A couple things which I think is important for people who are listening. So almost everybody who's listening probably has a contract that they get the guest to sign, and this type of thing would be covered, right? So normally our contract says with 24-hour notice to the guest, we can come in and do maintenance. In this case, this was a brand new home, and there were some inspection items that we needed to take care of for the county, or they could potentially withdraw the certificate of occupancy. So there were legitimate reasons why, and they knew that it was a brand new property. They were actually the first guest. But Airbnb's position is their policies supersede our contract, right? So, and this is one of the dangers of dealing with Airbnb is even if you put in, provisions and also recourses, which happen, if you disobey our rules, this was a violation. I mean, the number of pets in the property completely violated the number that were allowed. I think we allowed 2 pets. And the HOA also has restrictions on the number of pets per property for obvious reasons. And they went obviously well beyond that. And then I think the bigger issue was when they entered the second time, they saw widespread damage in the case of pets urinating and other defecating on the furniture. The smell was unbelievable. And even with all that and the pictures, and all the evidence showing that the guests were literally destroying it, this was like a Pacific Heights type situation. We were still having difficulty telling Airbnb, you have to get this guest out of there. They were taking a very defensive pro-guest position. So Kayla, why don't you explain that?
Yeah. And honestly, not even just this guest, but in any kind of situation, it does seem that Airbnb tends to side with the guest. So from a guest standpoint, if they're reporting some kind of issue going on, it seems like they kind of get an immediate response. I'm so sorry. Here's a 30% refund. Here's what we can do for you. But from the property management side, when we're kind of reporting a big case like this, it's a little harder for us to plead our case. When I was putting in the air cover claim for all these damages, they're requesting a ton of information from us. I have to go by, one by one from the invoice, requesting money back for each item. They want an age of that item. They want pictures. They want the original invoice from when we purchased it. They want an invoice for the replacement. They want anything else. They just keep asking for more. So it's just very difficult from a property management standpoint. It's such a different process than if this guest were to book direct, because now I have to go and get all this additional documentation just to prove to Airbnb that, yes, they definitely damaged our property.
It was a brand new property. They were the first guest. This is about as airtight of a claim as you could get.
Probably going to lose. And that's what's the frustrating part is, and I don't want to get in the weeds because our account manager got involved besides Kayla, who's directly with Airbnb. So we are in better spirits and don't want to throw them down. But again, it's aggravating as a platform from being a property manager, because us as a V-Trips brand, right? Even that this could have been another homeowner on our program with a brand new home, and we would have been out getting the 10 grand worth of damages fixed out of pocket and having to reimburse this reservation. Possibly. We truly don't know, but we also don't know that we're going to get the payout and it's Steve Milo's house. So.
Well, and the house was down. How many days did you have to block it out to basically clean it up?
10 days. So loss of revenue with an additional, the Airbnb is not going to pay an additional, I think it was like $5,200.
Right. So again, a massive issue here with, and as Kayla said, if this was a guest issue, Airbnb would have been on this immediately, giving the guests money back from their credit card. And yet, when it's an issue that's clearly, we clearly have the photographs and all the evidence to show that these guests basically just took a bunch of dogs and cats and basically treated this property like a kennel, right? So this was a terrible situation. Miriam, do you have some pictures before or after to share?
So here's some just beginning, and I mean, just the pool table. We walked in full of, brand new pool table covered in cat hair, used it as pretty much a storage area. They hung curtains in our house. So brand new living room. So the blinds that we put in there, you can see out, you just can't see in. And this is all just hair and poop and all the things. And I think this for me was the best. They broke brand new granite because they decided to stand in the up on the faucet sides of the stainless steel to hang their curtains. And they broke brand new granite on the.
We also want to take action against this Airbnb user, this person who stayed with us, because we don't want them to go to another property manager and destroy another cabin.
So the next morning we go in, we got them evicted. We had to call in the cops and get them involved and do all the things. And I got there first from our company, and I walked in, and I just turned around and walked right back out the door and went and sat down across the street. We've got to get this house cleaned up, right? We got to get it back. We got to see what's going to happen. And all this is on July 4th. So that's what makes this story even better is it's the 4th of July. And, we have all this brand new furniture where they had nine little puppies. We don't know if they had rabies.
Miriam had decorated this house and she was all proud of it. And then these guests ruined it. So.
I don't even know if I told you this. The best part, this is truly the best part. That next day or 2 days later, I'm walking in and all the furniture, the couches, the love seat, and the chair are all out because we had to get new stuff. And I see one of the pictures that I'd hung above the couch. It had a tag on it. And I'm like, there is no way I left a tag on a picture. And then I get to looking at it, and I'm assuming their dog or something ate it. So they put a new picture in.
I think the lesson here is, which we've talked about a lot, you have to mark Airbnb up. We'll see how much money we get back from Airbnb on this claim. This one to me is about as airtight as you could ever have because they were the first guest. We have all the receipts, and we'll certainly update listeners in the future as to how much money Airbnb actually provided back to us, because it's a massive amount of damage between the actual damage, then the cleaning fee to pay for all the people that had to come in and basically do this hazmat, and then the loss of revenue for the 10 days that it was shut down. And it's, had it been another owner, not an institutional owner like me, we may have lost the house. They may have, fired us over this, because, typically someone would get very emotional about this and say,
Look, me. I'm the emotional one. I would be the one like, I'm pulling this listing. Yeah, no, you're correct. I will say this. I will, even while we're talking about emotions, I have always been the property manager that I tell all my homeowners, don't get invested. Be invested to a point, but don't be emotionally attached. And I made the mistake. Like I see now why whenever I have to have the conversations with the homeowners on certain degrees of stuff, I get it now. Whereas before I was like, it's a couch.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode. Thank you, Kayla and Miriam, for giving us the color on the Airbnb guest from hell or the Airbnb puppy mill. And we'll look forward to getting back with another episode in the near future. So thank you, everyone.